you have to pretend that Bronny's an NBA player, because otherwise you'll upset the king. And remember, he is a 6'2" guard that's a non-point guard. I've never seen that existing in the current NBA. And go back 20 years. He is 1 for 16 in the NBA from the floor, 0 for 7 on threes. He's not an NBA player. He was not a great high school player. He was a good high school player. He wasn't a good college player. He was a college player.
One and done.
I don't want to be a hater, but I think after LeBron leaves, he
In the NBA, there's an unspoken rule. You have to treat Bronny James like a legitimate NBA player, or you risk facing the wrath of LeBron's fan base. But let's look at the reality. He's a 6'2" guard who doesn't operate as a true point guard. That combination is nearly impossible to find a role for in today's NBA. And when you look at his actual numbers, he was shooting 1 for 6 from the field and 0 for 7 from 3. Those aren't the numbers of an NBA player. And honestly, the foundation was shaky long before he reached this level. He wasn't an elite high school prospect. He was solid, not special. He wasn't a standout college player either. He was simply a guy who played college basketball. One and done. And I'm not trying to be harsh here, but once LeBron eventually moves on, Bronny's time in Los Angeles is probably over too. The Lakers thought they could keep things quiet. That was their plan. They believed they could carefully manage Bronny James's development, shield him from the noise, let him grow at his own pace, and still compete in the most watched basketball market in the world. But that plan is now being seriously questioned, because every time Bronny gets benched, fans start asking the same uncomfortable question. Are the Lakers already starting to panic? The moment his playing time began shrinking and his role became inconsistent, the internet didn't wait for an explanation. Every major sports page started pushing the same story. Maybe the organization is realizing this situation is far more complicated than they originally anticipated. And once a narrative like that gains traction online, it doesn't slow down. It builds. What makes this situation uniquely difficult is that Bronny isn't being given the same grace most rookies receive. Under normal circumstances, a young player can quietly work through their struggles. They can go through rough stretches, make mistakes, and develop without every single possession becoming national news. Bronny doesn't have that option. His last name removes that privilege entirely. Every missed shot gets amplified. Every benching turns into a headline. Every coaching decision gets dissected like it's connected to some larger narrative involving LeBron, the front office, and the long-term direction of the entire franchise. So what do you think his NBA career actually looks like from here? One and done. The moment footage and reports started circulating showing Bronny back on the bench with reduced minutes, fans immediately divided into two camps. One group argued the Lakers were finally taking a sensible approach, pulling back, being patient, and letting him develop without unnecessary pressure. The other group believed the organization was quietly losing faith, and they just weren't saying it publicly yet. And that second narrative, that's the one that spread, because sports culture online doesn't thrive on patience, it thrives on panic. If a rookie has 2 rough games, the word bust is already trending. That's the climate Bronny stepped into before he ever played a meaningful NBA minute. The Lakers tried to keep the messaging calm and controlled. Coaches spoke about learning the system, adjusting to the pace of the professional game, and earning playing time through consistent effort. But the fan base wasn't interested in the measured explanation. The moment his role started shrinking again, social media treated it as confirmation that something was wrong behind closed doors. Every clip of him on the bench became a data point. Every rotation adjustment became a debate. And once ESPN, YouTube, and NBA Twitter lock onto a story, it travels faster than any front office can manage. He even did a video calling Bronny James the worst player in the history of the NBA, the worst ever. And here's the thing that almost nobody is actually talking about. The pressure surrounding Bronny James may genuinely be impossible for any young player to handle perfectly. Think about what that actually means. He isn't just trying to survive his first NBA season. He's trying to survive it while being measured against LeBron James every single day. That's not ordinary pressure. That's a psychological weight most people can't fully appreciate. Fans aren't comparing him to other second-round picks. They're comparing him to one of the greatest basketball players who ever lived, simply because they share a last name. No rookie handles that environment without taking damage from it. And this is exactly why the Lakers find themselves in such an impossible position. Give Bronny heavy minutes and he struggles. Critics immediately call it favoritism and a publicity stunt. Pull him back, reduce his role, give him time to develop. Critics say the organization has already lost confidence and is quietly panicking. There's no version of this that avoids controversy. The basketball world already turned Bronny into a symbol before he ever played a meaningful NBA possession. Some fans are emotionally invested in his success because of how much they love LeBron. Others are openly rooting against him because they're exhausted by the constant media attention surrounding the James family. That emotional divide reshapes how every single moment gets interpreted. He just didn't play well. Plain and simple. The statistics started feeding the debate, too. Analysts began highlighting Bronny's inconsistent offensive output, his limited scoring opportunities, and his visible difficulty adjusting to the speed of NBA competition. Critics used those numbers as confirmation he wasn't ready. Supporters pushed back, pointing out that nearly every rookie guard struggles early when facing professional-level defenses. But Bronny doesn't get the same grace period other young players receive. A rough shooting night from another prospect barely generates a mention. The same performance from Bronny becomes front-page sports content within minutes. This is also where young players tend to make their biggest mistake. They start hearing the criticism too clearly, and instead of letting the game develop naturally, they try to silence every doubter all at once. They force shots, overthink routine decisions, and lose trust in their own instincts. That's the moment confidence starts breaking down. The NBA has seen plenty of talented prospects who had the physical tools but couldn't survive the mental weight of impossible expectations. And Bronny's expectations are extraordinary for someone who entered the league as a developmental prospect. What's particularly interesting is how rapidly fans connected his benching back to LeBron. The moment Bronny's minutes began disappearing again, people started questioning whether LeBron pushed too hard to make this moment happen in the first place. Some critics argued the Lakers drafted Bronny primarily to keep LeBron satisfied. Others defended the decision by noting that Bronny genuinely worked for years under intense public scrutiny just to reach this level. But regardless of which side people landed on, the pressure surrounding the James family only grew heavier. The Lakers anticipated media attention when they brought Bronny into the organization. What they may not have fully prepared for was how emotionally charged every conversation would become, because this stopped being purely about basketball a long time ago. It's about legacy, it's about family, it's about power dynamics and modern sports culture transforming every roster move into must-watch content. Fans today don't watch with patience. They watch waiting for either a breakthrough moment or a complete collapse. That's precisely why a benching triggered full-scale panic narratives almost immediately.
And there's another uncomfortable layer to this entire situation. Player development in the NBA requires time, but time is something Los Angeles doesn't easily offer. The Lakers aren't a rebuilding organization where young players can quietly grow over several seasons without consequences. This is a championship-focused franchise, with LeBron James still actively competing at the highest level. Every game carries weight. Every rotation decision carries consequences. Coaches don't have the freedom to experiment indefinitely. That reality places even more pressure on Bronny because nobody is evaluating him in a vacuum. They're evaluating him inside a win-now environment. The comparisons to other young players around the league made things worse. Fans pointed at other rookies earning meaningful minutes and questioned why Bronny wasn't generating the same trust. Critics pulled highlight clips from other prospects as evidence that he simply didn't belong at this level. But context consistently disappears online. Other young players aren't navigating the same media circus. Other rookies don't walk into every arena knowing that cameras will immediately cut to LeBron's reaction after every single possession. This is where things get genuinely dangerous for a narrative. Once sports media identifies what it perceives as weakness in a story, it doesn't ease off, it intensifies. Debate shows aren't built around balance, they're built around engagement. Bronny James generates engagement. LeBron James generates engagement. The Lakers generate engagement. Combine all three and every minor development instantly becomes a national storyline. That's exactly what happened here. Instead of reading the benching as standard rookie development, the public read it as a sign that something behind the scenes had already shifted. What made the reaction even louder was Bronny's silence. He didn't respond emotionally on social media. He didn't clap back at critics. He kept his head down and kept working. And ironically, that silence made people speculate even more aggressively. Fans began projecting their own assumptions onto him. Some decided he looked frustrated. Others claimed he appeared mentally drained. Social media essentially became a body language analysis for him, with people dissecting bench footage frame by frame. LeBron's presence adds yet another layer of weight to everything. Think about what it actually means to try and build your own NBA identity while your father is one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet, and he's sitting courtside at every game. Every performance immediately becomes attached to him. If Bronny plays well, people credit LeBron's influence and resources. If Bronny struggles, critics blame LeBron for engineering a situation that set his son up for public failure. There's almost no space for Bronny to simply exist as a young player still figuring things out. What's worth noting is that many former NBA players actually came to the Lakers' defense when it came to managing Bronny's role carefully. Veterans who lived through that transition understand what the adjustment to professional basketball truly demands. They know confidence is fragile. They know overexposing a young player before he's ready can cause damage that takes years to undo. But online culture doesn't operate on long-term thinking. Fans want answers immediately. If a rookie isn't producing, something must already be broken. The benching conversation also reignited the nepotism debate all over again. Critics argued that Bronny's roster spot existed because of his last name and nothing else. Supporters responded by pointing out that sports has always included family connections, and that Bronny still has to go out and perform like every other player on that court, regardless of how he got there. The uncomfortable truth is that both sides of this argument hold some validity. LeBron's influence absolutely opened doors that might not have existed otherwise, but an open door doesn't guarantee what happens once you walk through it. The NBA is unforgiving. Players either establish themselves or they fade out. There are no exceptions based on last names. Another element that poured fuel on the fire was the Lakers' own history with young talent. Fans immediately started referencing previous prospects who buckled under the weight of playing in Los Angeles. Some argued the franchise has never demonstrated real patience with player development. Others believe the spotlight itself is genuinely damaging to younger players still trying to find their footing. The moment Bronny's minutes dropped again, every one of those old conversations resurfaced. What makes this especially difficult for the organization is that every single move now reads as political. If Bronny plays more, critics say it's because LeBron demanded it. If Bronny sits, critics say the front office already regrets the decision. There's no neutral interpretation available anymore. That's what happens when a player becomes the biggest story in sports before he's had any real chance to establish himself as one. Social media made the entire situation dramatically worse. In a different era, a young player could struggle through a rough stretch without millions of people reacting in real time. Today, a missed shot becomes a meme within seconds. A sideline expression gets clipped, captioned, and shared across every platform before the quarter even ends. That kind of relentless noise affects athletes psychologically, whether fans are willing to acknowledge it or not. Bronny entered the league during a period where the criticism genuinely never stops. What's equally striking is how divided Lakers fans became among themselves. Some believed Bronny needed to step away from the spotlight entirely and develop somewhere quieter. Others were convinced that benching him too frequently would permanently damage whatever confidence he was still building. And then there was a third group who felt the organization had simply become trapped, unable to make any basketball decision without it being filtered through the politics of the James family relationship. The legacy dimension makes this story nearly impossible to set aside. LeBron spent years openly speaking about his dream of sharing the NBA floor with his son. It became one of the most emotionally compelling storylines of his later career. And then the moment finally arrived, but reality landed harder than the fantasy, because history sounds remarkable in the abstract until actual games begin and real performance expectations take over. The NBA doesn't operate on sentiment, it operates on production. Bronny's situation reflects something worth examining about modern basketball culture more broadly. Fans constantly claim they want young players to be given room to develop naturally, but the second a rookie shows any sign of struggle, the response is immediate and brutal. Patience has essentially disappeared. Everything gets pushed to one extreme or the other. A player is either the future of the franchise or already a failed experiment. There's almost no middle ground left. Bronny walked into one of the most emotionally charged situations imaginable at precisely the wrong moment for athlete development. And maybe that's why the Lakers appear nervous from the outside. Not necessarily because they've abandoned belief in Bronny, but because they fully understand how combustible every decision has become. A rotation adjustment generates headlines. A minute restriction triggers debate segments. The organization isn't purely managing basketball operations anymore. They're managing a media storm that doesn't take days off. Something else that keeps getting overlooked is how young Bronny actually still is. Most players his age are quietly absorbing the professional game in low-pressure environments without national scrutiny attached to every appearance. Bronny is doing that same developmental work carrying one of the most famous names in the history of American sports. That changes the emotional reality of every single game. Maintaining confidence becomes exponentially harder when the entire internet is sitting in judgment, waiting for your next performance to either confirm or challenge their existing opinion. At the same time, critics would argue that pressure is simply part of the deal when privilege is involved. They'd say Bronny understood what this path looked like before he ever committed to it. And honestly, that argument has merit too. The spotlight was never going to disappear. Playing alongside LeBron on the Lakers guaranteed that from day one. But there's a significant gap between intellectually understanding what pressure feels like and actually living through that every night at the professional level. What's almost remarkable is how quickly one strong stretch of games could completely reverse the entire narrative. That's the speed at which sports conversations move today. If Bronny suddenly puts together 2 or 3 solid weeks, the same voices currently discussing organizational panic would likely pivot to praising the Lakers for handling his development carefully. Online narratives shift almost entirely based on the most recent results, with very little regard for what was said before. Still, the anxiety surrounding the Lakers feels grounded in something real, because championship-caliber teams genuinely don't have the bandwidth for emotionally complicated experiments. LeBron's competitive window is narrowing. Expectations in Los Angeles are always operating at a level most franchises never experience. And when a young player sits at the center of constant controversy, organizations instinctively start thinking about how to protect themselves from the fallout. What gives this story a weight that extends beyond basketball is what Bronny has already come to represent. He carries legacy, family pressure, privilege, generational expectations, and the full force of modern sports media all at the same time. That's an extraordinary burden for any young athlete, and every benching simply adds another layer to an already overwhelming conversation. The debate also revealed how differently fans apply their standards depending on who the player is. If Bronny were an anonymous rookie guard coming off a quiet draft, inconsistent early minutes wouldn't register as news. But because his father is LeBron James and because he wears a Lakers uniform, every normal step of the development process becomes a breaking story. Fans aren't just reacting to basketball decisions, they're reacting to what those decisions symbolize. Reduced playing time becomes evidence of fear. A quiet stretch becomes proof of regret. The story inflates well beyond what the actual facts support. Years from now, people will almost certainly look back at this entire period through a completely different lens, and that lens will be shaped almost entirely by how Bronny's career ultimately unfolds. If Bronny develops into a reliable NBA contributor, the critics will look impatient and reactionary. If he struggles long-term, people will point back to these exact moments as early warning signs that everyone chose to ignore. That's always how sports history rewrites itself. Results determine the narrative retroactively. But right now, the debate feels louder than ever because nobody genuinely knows what Bronny James will become. And perhaps that uncertainty is the very reason fans are so fixated on every Lakers decision. Some believe the organization is doing the right thing by protecting a young player from pressure he